We got some viewers. What's up, guys? Good evening. Waiting on a couple more people to come in, and we'll get him in here, and we'll get rolling. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight. If you guys have questions for Jeff, post them in the chat over on the side. We've got a couple of viewer questions, optimizer questions already lined up, and we got some cool things to go through with Jeff for you guys. Jeff, are you here?
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me all right?
I gotcha.
Excellent.
Hey, do you happen to have headphones? Because it sounds like maybe when I'm talking, the audio is echoing.
Oh, hold on a second. Let me just turn it down a little bit, maybe. Is that any better at all?
I only hear it when I talk, so I don't hear it now. So it should be good.
Okay, I turned it down a little bit on the volume. Let me turn the, yeah, okay. If that sounds okay, then, and it says I've got no video here. Is that right?
Yeah, your screen is showing up as dark. I think if you kind of hover over that window, like where you would see my face up above that, there should be a little camera. You can click that, maybe turn on your video.
Okay, let's just see. So it says, wait a second, it says needs my permission. Okay. Well, now I'm seeing you, and it looks, but you can't see me at this point in time. Wait, there's a microphone. Camera says it's on. Let me just check my here, and maybe it's in my Safari preferences. Huh. Okay.
So if you guys listening, I just put a link in the chat section. There is a link there for anybody to join or attend the webinar. So feel free to share that out with anybody. If you have friends that are trying to get on or want to be on, if you want to share that on social media, that would be cool. Whatever you guys want to do with that link, there's the link to get viewers.
So I'm going to put, does that sound any better or worse right now, Ryan? I've got kind of my, I think what's happening is my microphone, because I have this on, maybe my output is not. Can you see me now?
I can't. No, I can't see you. As guest join.
That works okay.
We can hear you. We know you're real. We know you're there.
So you can still hear me fine?
Yeah, we can still hear you. We just can't see you.
Okay, well, I'm not sure why my camera's not working here, but maybe Sky can help me out here. We can certainly move along right now. I mean, I'm happy to get rolling.
Okay. Yeah.
Anytime you want.
Yeah, let's do that. And if you guys are able to resolve that, then you'll pop up. And if you do, I'll let you know that we can see you. And
okay, that's great.
So first of all, everybody who's here, thank you guys for joining us. Thanks for watching. My name is Ryan Muncie. I'm the Chief Optimizer with Natural Stacks. I am the host of the Optimal Performance Podcast. And speaking of the OPP, our guest tonight is Jeff Chilton, who was recently a guest on one of our most downloaded episodes of the Optimal Performance Podcast. Jeff has been growing mushrooms longer than I've been alive and is the founder of Namex North America Medicinal Mushroom Extracts. All around great guy and mushroom expert. So Jeff, if I missed anything in your bio, please feel free to fill that in now. And thanks a lot for being here and hanging out with us tonight.
Hey, I'm really totally stoked to be here, Ryan, and I'm happy to answer. You got most of the stuff in my bio. I mean, I think the main thing that people should understand is that I've been actually in the mushroom industry since 1973. That's when I started growing mushrooms, and way before most people here were probably born.
So I said over 30 years, but it's actually over 40 years.
That's right. It's over 40 years, and that was just back then when I started. That was a passion of mine. I had studied actually ethnomycology in university, so it's mushrooms and culture, and then after university, I decided to go to work on a mushroom farm. And so for 10 years, I was working on a mushroom farm, learning how to grow mushrooms. And, you know, I truly loved every minute of it. It was just great. I lived with mushrooms. I was there with them every day. I not only was there at the farm, and it was a large farm. There was 200 employees, and we put in 4 rooms of a new mushroom culture every week. So there was literally 200 crops a year. So think about that for a minute. 200 crops. I saw 200 crops. You know, it's like, how many crops of vegetables do you see a year when you're growing vegetables out there? Well, okay, 1 crop a year maybe, right? But this is 200 crops of mushrooms a year. So it's quite an educational experience, and that led me from food mushrooms into the medicinal side of mushrooms, which I think, you know, food-wise, mushrooms are excellent food. Very, very positive, great nutrients in mushrooms. But the medicinal side just adds to their value. It's amazing. Great food and a great supplement.
You know, I don't think that when we did the podcast, I don't think we talked about the fact that you actually studied mycology. You studied mushrooms in school, so you're not just, you know, you're not the equivalent of, you know, an Instagram fitness person throwing out diet advice on Instagram. You studied this stuff in school, and you have 40 years experience with it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I actually studied under a world famous mycologist at the University of Washington, Dr. Daniel Stuntz. He was a very well-known mycologist. I was very fortunate to be able to study with him at the time. I mean, mycology was a minor, let's say. I mean, my major was anthropology, and that's where the ethnomycology came in, because I was really interested in the role mushroom played in various cultures worldwide. And you know, you don't do much with that once you get out of school and have to make a living. So I just decided, well, mushroom growing is the best thing for me in terms of moving forward. So.
Okay, very cool. So I just posted a link in the chat. So if you guys watching this haven't heard or seen Jeff on the Optimal Performance Podcast, there's a link over there. If you go to the left side of your screen, you can click chat, and it will show up as a kind of a sidebar on the right side of your screen. So you guys can click that link and bookmark that for later if you haven't seen it. I'm going to assume that a lot of people here have heard that or have seen that. So we won't duplicate a lot of that content, but a lot of what we said in that podcast is kind of the foundation or the genesis for why Natural Stacks has made some mushroom products, our Myco line. And we're going to talk about those products specifically, how to use them, when to take them. But just in case people are in this webinar that haven't heard all of those details, you know, Jeff, you helped shine light on some things that are going on in the mushroom supplement industry. Can you briefly give us the rundown of, you know, what the beneficial component is in medicinal mushrooms, why it's not there in mycelium grown products, what is mycelium?
Sure, absolutely. This organism that we're really referring to has a number of plant parts, and if you start out with a spore, That spore germinates into a filament called a hypha, which then comes together and forms a network. That network is called mycelium. We don't normally see mycelium because it's either underground or inside of its food source, which could be in the soil, it could be in wood. Most medicinal mushrooms actually grow on wood. So this mycelium is the actual fungal body, let's say, and when conditions are right, it will produce a mushroom. And that mushroom is called the fruiting body. And then that mushroom, when it's mature, will produce spores, and that completes this cycle. So traditionally now, mushrooms are what have been used not just for food, but medicinally. So that is the traditional source of these medicinal compounds, and of whether for supplement or for food, medicine, that's what has traditionally been used. Today, some companies actually grow this mycelium on grain. And for us in the mushroom business, that was called grain spawn, and we used that live mycelium as seed to grow our mushrooms. It was never actually designed to be a supplement, because what happens is they grow the mycelium on grain. After a period of time, it colonizes the grain. Think about a product called tempeh. That's kind of what they're doing with this mycelium on the grain, is growing this fungal matter on a grain, harvesting it, drying it, grinding it to a powder. The problem with that is that all of that grain is a major component of that product. And so rather than being 100% fungal tissue like a mushroom, it is a very low amount of fungal tissue and a large amount of grain. And the reason that we know this is because we've done a lot of analysis. I mean, at this point in time, and that paper you're showing, Ryan, yeah, that's some of our original work. And
this is the lab analysis. So if you've seen the podcast, we put these studies. This was independent testing that you had done at Virginia Tech, and you didn't actually do it. Somebody else did it, correct?
Third party,
right.
Independent laboratories that did all the testing.
So we shared that study and those results on the blog post for the podcast that you were on, and that is the link that's in the chat on the side. So anybody who wants this paperwork, these lab reports, click that link, and on that blog post, you'll be able to download this PDF. And it shows the percentage of beta-glucans and alpha-glucans, which are respectively the active compounds and the starch component of both whole fruit bodies and the mycelium grown on grain. And you're able to see the difference in content, based on how, what product you're testing, measuring, and how they were grown.
Yeah, and the important takeaway of that is that mushrooms are high in beta-glucans, and beta-glucans are the compounds that give mushrooms their medicinal properties. So without those, you don't really have a medicinal mushroom. So the mushroom has a high amount of beta-glucans. Mycelium on grain has a low amount of beta-glucans. Mushrooms have no starch, and mycelium on grain is full of starch from all the grain there. So that's the difference. You have 100% fungal matter, or you have a small amount of fungal matter. You have a lot of beta-glucans, or you have hardly any beta-glucans. And so your product, which is 100% mushroom tissue, I mean, that's it. It's like a high quality mushrooms, organically certified. Those products are rich in beta-glucans. And one of the things I want to say, because it was really interesting looking at the products and the way you guys developed it, because your immune product, which has reishi, turkey tail, and chaga, and what's really interesting with the analyses that we did, Ryan, was that we tested probably 16 different species of mushrooms, and the highest mushrooms in these beta-glucans actually, believe it or not, are reishi and turkey tail. Those two mushrooms have the highest amounts of these beta glucans, and so it's like, well, historically, reishi is the most highly revered mushroom out there, not just with the beta glucans, but also with other compounds called triterpenoids. But the fact that those two mushrooms, which science has proven as being so very active, actually have, of all those mushrooms, some of the highest amounts of beta glucan. So it's really it's been proven out in a sense by our testing that there's a good reason for that.
It's funny that, for people listening, you're able to speak with such confidence about our products because you are our source for the mushrooms. You know that they are organic. You know the quality of mushroom and product that we start with. So we'll talk a little bit about your production process, and I know some of our optimizers have questions about testing and extraction processes. But before we do that, you mentioned the beta glucan content of reishi and turkey tail. One of the questions that an optimizer sent in before, and I think now's as good a time as any to ask it, they want to know, what is the king of all medicinal mushrooms? So if you had to pick just one, I know this is like asking you which one of your children is your favorite, but if you had to pick.
Well, okay, and that's an interesting question because a lot of people want to know that. And let me just say that there's not always the king, because oftentimes the king changes.
Right.
What I mean by that too is that in the 70s, actually, shiitake was considered the king. In the 80s and 90s, reishi was considered the king. In the late 90s, maitake was considered the king. Now people are talking about chaga as the king. I would just like to say, a lot of that is marketing speak. But what I would say is that there's no question in my mind that the premier medicinal mushroom is reishi, and the reason is that, and if you look at the Chinese history and the mythology around reishi and what they call it ling qi. I mean, it is something where it is. They say it's a spiritual mushroom. It is good fortune. It is in so many of their myths and art and statues. It is everywhere, and there's good reason for that. High amounts of beta glucans, and it has these triterpenoids. These are the bitter compounds in reishi, and the two of them together create a very unique mushroom with more powerful benefits than any of the others. So you want a king? I'll crown one right now. It's reishi.
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, like you said, in Chinese medicine, it's been revered as a tonic or a tincture for immortality and longevity. And there's tons of modern research that supports and backs that up. Are you familiar with some of the new modern studies on reishi that you can talk about, or is that not something?
Well, you know what? It's interesting because Sky and I, my son Sky and I, we were just in China at a Ganoderma, a reishi conference, and at this conference were two old friends of mine that I'd met in the early 90s, and one of them was a man called Lin Jibin, and he is the premier reishi scientist in China. He's at Beijing University. He's a member of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. He's been researching Ganoderma longer than I've been involved in the mushroom industry. Dr. Lin is really the man, and he gave a keynote lecture there, and it was really interesting but of course what he said was, it's the beta glucans that are the key compound here. He said one of the major functions of Ganoderma is to prevent disease, and that's really important. Again, we're talking about one of the premier adaptogens. This is something that we take on a preventive basis. This is something that helps to maintain a harmony, a balance, a stasis. It will It will modulate different systems to bring them into balance. The other thing I thought was really interesting, he talked about 4 different major uses of reishi. 5 actually. One of them was sleeplessness. Anybody out there having problems sleeping? Take reishi. That's one of the major things that it'll do. Interestingly enough, too, he talked about reishi improving memory. He said there's a double-blind study in China on reishi improving memory. Also reducing blood sugar. And then, of course, one of the major areas where it's so good is in protecting the liver and helping the liver to function when maybe people are having liver problems. That's where the triterpenes come in. They're really important for maintaining a higher level of liver function. So this was coming literally from the mouth of the guy that is the premier reishi researcher, not just in China, but we're talking the world. This guy's the man, Dr. Lin, amazing guy, and it was so great to see him again. I haven't seen him in 20 years.
That's really, really cool. So you mentioned that reishi can help with sleep. Would you recommend taking it at night, or is there a better time to take it?
You know what? I think what you're really talking about is taking it regularly, and it's not like a sleeping pill where you take it and then it just automatically kicks in. That's not how it works. It's something you take it at any point in the day when you would regularly take whatever you might be utilizing, and then over a period of time, it's going to slowly start to work its functions for that particular malady, for sleeplessness, and that's something that when Dr. Terry Willard wrote his book on reishi back in the early 90s, that was one of the major things that he was talking about too, was the fact that there was a lot of research that supported the fact that it was something that could help people with insomnia.
That's really cool. So, we want to go over all 3 of our myco stacks and talk about the best time to take them. I'll tell you and our listeners when we've been recommending it, and if you agree, let us know you agree. If you think there's a better way to do it, by all means, let us know. So since we're talking about reishi, and we'll stick with myco immune, I've been taking this in the evening with curcumin and magtech before bed, simply because that's just when I can remember to take it and be consistent with it, as you said. With the myco mind, this is the one that has lion's mane and bio-PQQ, the brain cell optimizer formula. I'm taking this in the morning with my Siltep and whatever else I'm stacking or taking for that day. I get the great brain boost, motivation, and that lasts all day long. The myco boost is the one that has cordyceps and yerba mate. I'm taking that one in the morning too, because I usually work out in the morning, and I like this as kind of a pre-workout and a boost in the morning. But really, this is one that could be taken kind of as needed throughout the day by anybody who just wants a little pick-me-up or an extra kick in energy or vitality, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So looking at these as a whole, are we spot on with when to take these, or do you have any other recommendations or maybe tips that we don't know about?
Well, you know what? It's interesting because I've just read something recently where they said, well, this beta-glucan should be taken on an empty stomach because of the fact that they are hitting receptor sites. And that if you took them with a lot of other things, then they wouldn't necessarily be able to reach those receptor sites as readily. I have only seen that once before, so I can't really speak to that in terms of, okay, are they right? Are they not right? I don't know whether that's true or not. But, with a lot of supplements, people would say take it before meals or something like that. So it gets into your system before you have a lot of other things there. So, it doesn't hurt to look at it that way and maybe try it that way and see whether that works better than than not. I mean, I really don't know. That's something that I think the jury's out on, that exactly what the right time to take that is. Because let's face it, when we're even eating a meal, I mean, you think of all those nutrients and everything that's going, once it hits your stomach, I mean, it just turns into a mishmash, right? And so to actually say, well, yeah, because of that, you're not going to get this nutrient or that nutrient. Maybe in special cases that's right, but otherwise, I don't know whether one could say that about the mushrooms.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So let's do, I'm trying to look through some of these questions. I think before we really dig into all the user questions, let's go back and kind of talk about your production and extraction process. I think talking through that will answer a lot of the questions that have been sent in. So if you can, Jeff, tell us, how your mushrooms go from, the bark where you grow them to handing them off to natural stacks.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me just say this, that our mushrooms are grown on natural materials. They're grown on, like reishi is grown on actually wood logs. Most of the other mushrooms are grown on nutrified sawdust logs. So this is very important because it's from that wood where so many of the precursors are that enable the mushroom to produce the important compounds. If you don't have the precursor, the fact is those important compounds are not going to be produced. So right off the bat, we're producing the mushrooms on natural substrates in natural conditions. So this is kind of like, what we like to say is that they're produced as nature intended. They're not produced in a laboratory under sterile conditions inside plastic bags or anything like that. No, these are produced the way mushrooms are supposed to be produced. These are the real thing, right?
Right.
So those mushrooms, the first thing we do after they're harvested is they are dried. And again, we're not drying substrate with it, and it's going to have substrate as part of the final product. No, this is like just 100% mushroom. The substrate is all left behind. We've got the mushroom. We dry it out. Those dried mushrooms then go off to the production facility. It is a high quality extraction facility. In fact, the ones we use are close to brand new. The equipment is amazing. In fact, I've got a slideshow on the Namex website. People want to go there, check it out. You can take a tour of where the mushrooms are extracted. It's really pretty cool. So what we do is first of all, we will grind those mushrooms to a fine powder. That powder will be put into a very large extraction tank with water. It will be cooked under pressure in hot water at about 80 degrees Celsius for 3 hours. Okay, and again, these have been ground to a fine powder. So one of the things that happens when it's a fine powder too is it is actually, you're breaking down cell walls. Now with the hot water, we're breaking down those cell walls even more. And part of that is that mushrooms do have a component in the cell walls called chitin. People who haven't heard of chitin, it's spelled CHITIN. And chitin actually is what like a crab shell is made of.
Yeah,
okay, the difference.
It's the fiber that's in the exoskeleton of like crickets and ants and things like that.
Well, yeah, that's right. Now the difference is like with a crab shell or something, it's also got a lot of minerals that it's using to create that shell. A mushroom obviously isn't like a shell. It's soft, you can chew it, things like that, but it does have chitin in it, and that does make it a little more difficult to digest. And so what that means is a lot of the mushroom will not be digested properly, and it will go through as fiber. So if you're eating mushrooms, a lot of that mushroom that you're eating will go all the way down, and it'll be part of your microbiome. And that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. That is a good thing. When we grind it to a powder and then we extract it at 80 degrees with hot water, that is also doing, we're basically breaking down those cell walls and making that mushroom fiber, those beta glucans, more available. So that's the first step in the process. The next step is essentially we take that liquid with all that powder in it, and we evaporate the liquid off, and we evaporate it off down to where it is like a syrup, and then that syrup gets sent to either a spray dryer or it gets put into a vacuum drying oven to where the remainder of the water is taken out of it until we just have a powder. So essentially, that mushroom fiber is never thrown away. That's part of the product, but it has been extracted and it is much more available to us to utilize as the supplement.
Okay, great. And then, so then from there, is that it?
That's basically it. Yeah, it goes through that water extraction process. Then it gets concentrated down. The liquid gets evaporated off, and then it gets dried to a fine powder, and then that's what ultimately goes into your capsules or tablets.
Okay. So then, you know, when we're talking about our mushrooms in the stuff that's in our product, you know, when we were saying our mushrooms, they're organically grown, we have they're dried whole fruit bodies and then extractions, you know, so, you know, that extraction process is actually concentrating the dose of medicinal compounds as opposed to just ingesting dried fruit bodies, right?
That's correct. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So you're getting something. So when people are taking that, and let's say taking a gram or two of your powder there, that's going to be certainly better than taking the equivalent of fresh mushrooms. Because one of the things you have to remember about fresh mushrooms is, like any food, you're chewing it. You're not necessarily chewing it very well. You know, it's just like you take anything and grind it to a powder, a flour. You're going to get more out of that flour than you will out of just like chewing on the seeds or all of those nutrients. You've got the surface area of all those nutrients, and that's what's going on with the mushroom powder here that's being created.
Okay, so how does that compare to you know, obviously the dried and extraction gives us a greater concentration and overall, you know, volume of beneficial components or compounds as opposed to eating them. But what about just dried and not extracts?
Well, I certainly encourage people to utilize dried mushrooms and eat dried mushrooms. But again, if you're going to eat a dried mushroom, you're not going to get the same benefits out of it. And even if you take that dried mushroom and just grind it up into a powder, well, again, you're not going to have that treated by the hot water to where it's actually helping to release those beta glucans from the chitin that it's bound with. So really, that extraction process is important in terms of making this product a more efficient beta glucan, more efficient delivery of those beta glucans. And that's really what we're doing with that water extraction process, is we're just like opening that up to where you're getting more of the benefits of those beta glucans than what you'd be otherwise.
Gotcha. And I know you guys do a lot of testing throughout the whole process too. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the compounds that you test for and why?
Well, you know, the very first thing that happens is that before our product even leaves China, and I hope everybody's aware of that, because I went to China all through the 90s, and in 1997 I went there with OCIA, who is one of the major organic certification outfits in the U.S. and held the very first organic certification seminar in China for mushrooms. So we've had organically certified mushrooms coming out of China since about 2001, 2002, and certified by high quality German certifiers. So the quality of these products is super high. Now, remind me again here. What was the question, Ryan? I kind of went off.
All of the compounds that you test for.
Okay, yeah. So what happens is before it even leaves the country, we test for heavy metals, and we test for pesticides. It doesn't leave the country unless it passes. You know what? I'm very concerned about my products. I'm very concerned about Chinese products, but they're the only place in the world where you can actually get mushrooms for use as supplements. You can't grow mushrooms in North America and use them as supplements. You just can't. That's why so many people grow this grain spawn. That they can't economically grow mushrooms in North America. You will never see a supplement unless it's like a small company. They're wildcrafting chaga and they put out a tincture, something like that, which is great. I think that's a wonderful thing. But in terms of getting out a volume of product to companies like yourself or other companies that I sell to, there's no way. It's just not economical. So that's why you won't see North American grown mushrooms in any of these supplement products unless they throw it in like pixie dust, which some of them do and then claim they've got mushrooms in their product. So we do those two tests before it even leaves China. And then when it comes over, when it arrives, it goes out for pesticide testing immediately. It goes out for heavy metals testing again immediately. We do microbiological testing on it, and then we send it out for, my God, you can't imagine. We send it out for beta glucan testing, alpha glucan testing, ergosterol testing. I mean, the testing that we do on these products is amazing, and the amount of data. The wonderful thing about that is that we are accumulating a body of data that is so deep. I mean, it is so deep. We are setting a standard here. We are coming up with a fingerprint for mushrooms that is going to be the industry standard. Our testing protocol is an industry standard right now. People have to meet that. They literally do. If they don't meet that, they might as well walk away, because that is the standard. So you guys have got a product that is essentially industry standard. It meets standards that so many products out there can't touch.
Well, and that's why we chose you as our source. That's something it's near and dear to our hearts. It's part of our values and our mission here at Natural Stacks. I want to, you mentioned, I want to highlight a couple of things you mentioned. One, the fact that the heavy metal testing and the pesticide and chemical testing is done twice, once before it leaves China, once when it arrives in the US. You mentioned the beta glucan and alpha glucan testing. That is on the label of each of our myco products. I don't know if this is going to show through on the camera or not, but we list the beta glucan content. This is the Myco Mind product, and it has over 30% beta glucans and under 3% starch. That's the alpha glucans. So those numbers are on every single myco product that we get from you, that we produce. And obviously you're the source of the testing and the information for that. But you also mentioned that in North America, it's not economically viable to produce mushroom bodies, and that's why mycelium on grain is produced. I mean, to me, it sounds like factory farming. But my question is, why? Is it an environmental, like a climate thing?
Well, no. Here it is, and just so that everybody's clear about this is hey, tons of mushrooms are being produced in North America. So I'm not saying that mushrooms can't be produced in North America. They can be produced for food, but the problem is that mushrooms are 90% water. So if you go out and let's just say you go out and you buy your pound of shiitake mushrooms, and you're paying $10 for that pound. Well, now if you wanted that same pound as a dry powder, you're paying $100 for that. So if a producer is selling that to a supplement manufacturer, and he has to get now, let's just say on the wholesale basis, $50 for that pound, $100 for that kilo that the producer has to get, nobody can afford to buy that from him and then go out and put it into capsules, bottles, and the rest, and sell it at retail. It can't be done. And that is, and especially, shiitake is just one of the, believe it or not, one of the cheaper mushrooms. When you start talking about some of the others, like maybe maitake and some of the shimejis out there that are even more expensive, I mean, you're talking about economics that just don't work. And so that is the issue. The issue is that economically, I mean, believe me, if they could do it, they would do it, but they can't. And that's why people produce this mycelium on grain, which is cheap to produce, because basically it's mostly grain. It's like go into the store and buy grain and see how cheap it is when you've got grain. So that's the issue here, and that's why those products are being produced, and it's a shame. And I encourage people to do your own testing. We actually have a starch kit. Buy the starch kit off the realmushrooms.com website and test those mycelium products with the starch test. And when you test them and that product in water turns absolutely black, put the Natural Stacks product right next to it and test it. Man, it is not going to turn at all, because mushrooms do not have starch in them, and those mycelium products are mostly starch, and that's just a very standard chemical reaction.
I love it. And so again, if you guys haven't seen the podcast episode, on the blog post for that, we have a link to that starch test kit. So go check that out. All right, Jeff, I want to throw some questions at you from our listeners. Let's talk about different applications for utilizing medicinal mushrooms, like scenarios maybe for, we talked a little bit about longevity or disease prevention, but what about things like endurance, recovery, mood, even people using them with their pets?
Well, and I certainly think using them for pets is fine. But let's just talk about, for example, cordyceps. Cordyceps has been used for fatigue. I mean that's one of the main uses in China for cordyceps is fatigue, and for somebody that actually is coming out of an illness and they've got this condition called asthenia, which is, it's a lack of energy. It's a physical weakness, and so that has really stimulated people to think, well, if that is being used for fatigue, and the part of that is the fact that research has shown that it allows a more efficient utilization of oxygen, and so greater survival in areas like high altitudes where you have low oxygen. People can operate better at those altitudes. So athletes have sort of picked up on that and went, well, that's really interesting. Let me just try this for athletic performance. So right away you're looking at something where, wow, everybody is kind of looking for let's just call it a natural edge in these kind of things. And what's interesting about your product too is that you've combined it with mate, right?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Which is a really interesting combination, and something where I suspect people are going to be like, wow, they'll probably really feel the surge of that, and it's going to be interesting to see how that, when it comes together, combining the feedback you get on that, because again, I think that's unique and really interesting. But again, this is something where recovery from exhaustion, cordyceps, that's one of the main things that it is used for. And again, this gets back to not just to the oxygen and the rest, but to adaptogenic properties of anti-stress, and that just is the ability to enhance endurance and strength generally. And again, a lot of the research with cordyceps has to do with immunity, and the fact that cordyceps also has a high amount of beta glucans, and those beta glucans are also part of the picture with cordyceps. When your immune system is stronger, everything functions better. It just absolutely does. So really, that shouldn't be overlooked with cordyceps. I mean, a lot of people go, okay, well, it it is involved with ATP production. So that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are studies that demonstrate that, animal studies, improved energy metabolism and things like that. So certainly that is part of it, but you have to look at the whole picture, and certainly the beta glucans come into play there as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the ATP production. There are studies. There's a 2007 study that we have listed on our website. Talking about how I'm quoting the researchers saying that cordyceps has the ability to enhance mitochondrial ATP generation, preserves mitochondrial structure and functional integrity, and thus retards the aging process. There's other studies that have shown that it reduces or increases the amount of time it takes to become fatigued during swimming tests. And like you said, these are in animal, and there are some human studies as well. There was one human study that showed increased lactic acid threshold by 10.5%. So there's a lot of research to support cordyceps for endurance and sport performance. And that's why, our product, Myco Boost, is great pre-workout. One of our favorite ways to stack it, this one actually came from Roy. Roy, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he likes to stack it with smart caffeine and biocreatine. That can be a great pre-workout, or it can be a great boost at any point during the day for energy, vitality, mental performance, as both caffeine and creatine have mental performance boosts, as well as yerba mate, which is proven to be slightly nootropic and have mental performance boosts there. So that's a really cool combination. It's actually one of our special stacks. So for you guys who are watching, if you check the links in your chat on the right side, we've got a link. It's the most recent link I just posted. We've got a few special stacks that utilize or highlight one of our new Myco stacks with some other Natural Stacks products in our favorite ways to use them. One for vitality with one for mental boost, and one for the energy boost that we just talked about. So as we start to talk a little bit more later about Myco Mind and Myco Immune, I'll share that link again. But just so you guys know, with Myco Mind, I said earlier I take it with Siltep. Roy's favorite stack is Dopamine Brain Food, Myco Mind, and Siltep in the morning for all day motivation, productivity. That stack, we have a special price on that link over there in the chat section for the webinar as well. If you're watching this on a replay, there should be a link somewhere on your screen where you can go check out these special stacks that we put together for you guys. And obviously special pricing for you guys for being here and watching this. But and the final one is Myco Immune. And that is, as Jeff and I have already talked about a lot, mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms have an ability to, they're considered immunomodulators, and they boost the immune system. Combining that with curcumin and vitamin D3 is a great way to bolster your immune system, especially in the winter months when it's dark at 5 p.m. or earlier if you live at more northern latitudes. So really cool stacks there. We'll talk about those again in a little bit.
Brian, before you go, we move on from cordyceps at all, let me just say something about cordyceps, which is really important, and that is the majority of the cordyceps products on the market. There's this whole category that we've talked about, which is mycelium that's grown on grain and it's mostly starch. But there's a lot of other cordyceps on the market that are 100% mycelium. They're grown in liquid culture fermentation. They're products of China, and it's called most of those are called CS4, and CS4 has been around since the late 80s, when they were trying to find a substitute for the wild-crafted cordyceps in China, because even in China it was expensive. So they're looking for a substitute. They developed CS4, seemed to have some really good properties, but here's the thing: the cordyceps that we've got and that you've got is actual cordyceps fruiting bodies. These are real mushrooms. These are not mycelium that's been produced in liquid or anything like that. This is like the real thing. This is something, I mean, and let me tell you, not only that, this is new. This is a product that they just learned how to grow this within the last, let's just say 6-8 years. So this is so new that you're one of the few companies out there that has this product on the market. Very few companies have got this yet. So much of the cordyceps out there that other companies are selling is this other stuff, which is not the real thing again. And this is, I mean, and I encourage all of your listeners to look at the photos you've got on your website of Cordyceps militaris. It is amazing. These are orange little fruiting bodies that are like almost like blades of grass, and it is a carpet of these things, and they are the most amazing things you've ever seen. And these are high in cordycepin, which is something that Cordyceps sinensis, the wildcrafted fungus, does not have. These are high in cordycepin, high in beta glucans. This is just an amazing product that is absolutely new and unique, and you guys are one of the first ones to be out there running with it. So I tell you, your listeners and your customers, man, you've got it right now with that cordyceps. That is something like none of those other companies, and I know some of the companies are touting their types of cordyceps products, man. And it's like, yeah, that's mycelium on grain. I'm sorry, it's not the real thing.
All right, so I want to get you to expand on that, but before you do, the picture that you were talking about is actually on the page that I just linked to. So if you're watching this, click the link that I gave you just a few minutes ago for the special stacks that we put together. There is a picture on that page of these cordyceps. And before we started this whole process, Jeff sent us real photos from China, from our mushrooms, his mushrooms. And, he said, you guys are going to love these photos. Look at these. And I just remember scrolling through all the photos, and that photo stood out to all of us. It's just, it's a beautiful picture. And we love the fact that those are the mushrooms that are in our products. So on the podcast, we didn't really talk about this CS4, and I honestly am not that familiar with it. So you're saying that it is liquid cultured?
Well, liquid culture is think about it as in a sense, think about it like, okay, we're putting mycelium into a very large tank, and the tank has got nutrients in it. Mm-hmm. It's the nutrients are 2% of that solution, so it's a big nutrient solution. It has been sterilized, so all of that liquid is sterile. Sterile mycelium culture is put into that liquid, and then the liquid is aerated and stirred for a period of, let's say, 3 to 8 days, while that mycelium starts to expand and grow inside that liquid. And then at a certain point, let's say at 5 to 8 days, they will essentially remove the liquid, remove the mycelium that has been produced, and then that mycelium mass, and again, this is pure mycelium. It's right. And there's been a lot of research. So I want everybody listening to know, I have nothing against mycelium per se. It's really a matter of how it's produced, and in this sense, it's being produced properly, which is in liquid culture. So you have a mycelium mass that gets dried, ground to a powder, and that's called CS4. At times, some people may actually extract the fluid because there are some components that get produced and put into the fluid by the mycelium. But that's the CS4. That's been grown in China since 1989. In fact, I had a sample of that when I first went to China in 1989, and I talked to the company that was producing it. They gave me a whole book on how it was produced, all the studies they went through to get it approved by the government. So it was approved by the government ultimately, and there's been a lot of research on it, clinical studies. So it's a decent product, but to me, it still isn't what I call the real thing, which is the actual fruiting body. And that's the interesting part about it is that, and Cordyceps militaris, which is what this is, has a lot of studies behind it. It's a proven quantity. So that again is something that is brand new. The CS4 is still out there, and if you're gonna but still it's not as good as the actual fruiting body, in my opinion.
So as you're going through that answer, I pulled out the data from these lab tests from before, and I don't know how I missed this, but CS4 is listed as one of the cordyceps tested on here.
Absolutely right.
And it's actually listed and tested twice.
Yep.
Both tests actually show less than 5% alpha glucan, which it means that there's a very low starch component to it.
That's right.
Which
Absolutely
is a positive.
That's a positive. Yep.
However, the beta glucan content, according to this study, is between 7.8 and 10.6%.
That's correct.
When we compare that to the Cordyceps militaris, it's that beta glucan is 37%, and the alpha glucan is only 2%. So
that's right. That's right. So it does not measure up when it comes to the beta glucan content. Does not measure up at all. And that's one of the reasons why I say that despite the research with it and the way it's grown and all of this, despite the fact that it's 100% mycelium and doesn't have all that grain, that alpha glucan with it, it does not compare to these Cordyceps militaris fruiting bodies. They are just another level above that. And that's what's so exciting about it. Because, I mean, think about this for a second. There's only approximately 24 mushrooms in the world that are being cultivated. So when you think about that, after all of this time and all the different plants and so on that we cultivate, and there's only 24 mushrooms out of thousands of species. And now we've got a new species that has just been brought into cultivation. I mean, for me, that's just like super exciting. I love that.
Just to clarify, when you say cultivated, you mean kind of being grown by humans?
That's right. That's what I mean. That's what I mean. Being grown by humans, not wildcrafted. Because most mushrooms out there are wildcrafted. There's a lot of mushrooms that we eat as food that are wildcrafted that cannot be cultivated. They can't. They're either growing in conjunction with trees or some other organisms. Often, normally trees in a symbiotic relationship or so they form a mycorrhizal, and they need the tree, and they help the tree, and the tree helps the fungus. But you can't cultivate those. So that's why bringing any new mushroom into cultivation, for example, morels. I don't know if you're familiar with morel mushrooms.
I have family members who hunt them.
Well, yes, and they were just brought into cultivation within the last 30 years, and only in the last 10 years and I just saw some pictures of this, were they grown on a, let's just call it, industrial scale, even though they were grown outside in rows in earth. And the pictures would blow your mind at all. Just a carpet of morels. They're a new mushroom for cultivation as well. So this is not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing at all. And so when something like this, and especially something like cordyceps, where we've been dependent on a wildcrafted cordyceps for the most part, historically, and now we have a cordyceps that actually we can cultivate and bring the benefits to people at a reasonable price, considering that the wildcrafted Cordyceps sinensis, the caterpillar fungus, grows up in Tibet, is the most expensive herb in the world, like up as much as $20,000 a kilogram.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
So if somebody wanted to try to grow mushrooms at home, do you have any tips for maybe the best species to grow at home, soil management tips to optimize nutrient content?
Oh yeah. And you know what? I actually wrote a book on growing mushrooms at home. For those people that are interested in growing mushrooms at home, I I co-authored this book. It was published in 1983. It's called The Mushroom Cultivator. It still sells 5,000 copies every year. So it is still
Nice.
out there. You can find it on Amazon. It'll cost you $30. It's got everything you need to know about how to grow mushrooms at home. And I'm not going to tell you it's easy, but it's very rewarding. And with the information that is in that book, you can grow mushrooms at home, and certain mushrooms, especially like an oyster mushroom, fairly easy. Shiitake, if you're in an area where you've got some wood logs, could be scrub trees of some sort. But we have alder around here, which is kind of considered a weed where we live. It's grown on oak traditionally. Hardwoods, any sort of hardwoods, you can grow shiitake on those. But otherwise, oyster mushroom grows on wheat straw. A lot of people have access to wheat straw. So yeah, you can grow mushrooms at home. My book will help you. It's still out there after all these years. Can you imagine 1983? And that was just as I was leaving the big commercial mushroom industry. I published that book and then went out on my own after that. And then in 1989 established North American Reishi Namex, and established that in 1989. Can you imagine 1989? Namex was established as really probably one of the first companies in North America to sell medicinal mushrooms. And I was literally walking the floor of trade shows like Natural Products Expo West with a big woody reishi mushroom in my hands.
And now in 2016, Dr. Oz is saying, not that we value Dr. Oz's opinion on a lot of things.
That's right.
He does have a voice and a platform, but he is saying that in 2017, medicinal mushrooms are going to be a trend, or at least that's his prediction.
That's right.
So how cool is that for you? I mean,
well, you know what? I love the fact that mushrooms generally are getting so much press these days. You see articles written about them all the time, not just for medicinal benefits, but also as foods. You know, we're a society that has not tuned into mushrooms the way they've tuned into it in let's just say Europe or Asia. I mean, you go to France or Germany or Eastern Europe, and they love their mushrooms. They're out there in the fall collecting them. In Asia, I mean, when Sky and I were in China recently, I mean, I'm not kidding you when I say every time we went out to dinner, there were at least 2 mushroom dishes, at least. And you know, the way they eat in China, they have a lazy Susan. They bring out maybe 12, 15 dishes that you take from, and there are a minimum of 2, and I mean dishes that are dominantly mushroom, and then there's probably 3 others that have mushrooms in them. They eat mushrooms as a major part of their diet over there.
Yeah, I was just in Finland, and it's very much the same. They were talking about, you know, how many types of mushrooms there are, and how they go out and pick them and grow them. And, you know, as you said earlier, it's, you know, ancient Chinese tinctures and Russian and Ayurvedic medicine, and they have been around for a while, but for whatever reason in the U.S. it hasn't caught on, and hopefully this wave will help remedy that. But so let's get to a couple more questions, and then we'll let folks go. So I know you know, we were talking about cordyceps a minute ago, and I should have worked this in at that point, but your question is regarding MycoBoost. Is it better to take as needed just prior to high exertion activities, or must it accumulate over time to be effective? In other words, how far in advance should one start a regimen prior to a mountaineering trip, for example?
Well, you know what I would say is I would say with most of these mushrooms, you should just get on the program right away and start it, and then, you know, because for one, you know, you might find that, okay, two capsules is really not the best dose. I need 4. Remember, you know, one of the things that we all have to do if we have a retail product like yours, and everybody who's selling one of those, okay, what's the serving size? Well, is the serving size the same for somebody who weighs 50 kilos or 100 kilos? Well, probably not, right? So everybody's going to be a little bit different. And if I were going to be going mountaineering or something, I would definitely want to be putting that into my diet right away. And then once I got there, seeing how well that was working for me, and maybe even boosting the amount while I was there, to sort of like, okay, I'm gonna basically take twice as much, or 3 times as much. And that's the cool thing about mushrooms, is that they're basic foods that are, you're not going to get poisoned by them. You're not going to get sick from them. There's no real downside here. So really, for most people, take 2 or 3 times the amount. See what it does for you. You're going to have to kind of work out your own relationship to this, as we all do. You know, we take these things and we make decisions on whether that is helping or not. And you know, generally speaking, I consider mushrooms to be somewhat subtle. It's not taking an IBU where all of a sudden that strain, I don't feel it as much. No, it's a little more subtle than that. So I would say, yeah, get into it right away, and get with the program.
All right, nice. It's interesting that you say, you know, kind of load up and then even take more when you're there. I think that's
Sure.
cool. I hadn't thought about it that way. Trying to look through some of these other questions. So
Yeah.
here's this. I'm going to change the way that this particular question is phrased, because, you know, I don't want to put you on the spot with brand names.
Sure.
So to rephrase this one, somebody's asking your thoughts on a particular product. I will phrase it this way. Are there any other brands of medicinal mushroom products that you would be comfortable taking?
Okay, well, here's what I would say is, beware of products that are manufactured in the USA. If it says made in the USA, I would avoid them. Beware of the product if it says mycelium, and look very closely, because a lot of them will say, okay, yeah, with rice or with oats or something like that, which is the giveaway for the fact of what it is. So, you know, it's not easy. There are brands out there that are actual mushroom, but even with the labels, it's difficult to know, because some people don't tell you. I saw a product recently that was called medicinal mushrooms, and it was a big thing of powder, and it had of the let's just say, of the ingredients, and it was like, okay, 7 grams, and of the 7 grams, 5 grams was something else entirely, and 2 grams was what they called a proprietary blend, listing all these things, and it was obvious right away that it was mycelium on grain. But can you imagine? And that was only 2 grams of this sort of 8-gram serving size or whatever it was. And I was just thinking, and they're actually calling this medicinal mushroom. I was shocked, literally shocked. And that's where, I mean, it's pretty easy for me to right away, by looking at the words that are being used, and I can go to the website and I can listen to how they're characterizing the product. It's easy. But for most people, when you go into a Whole Foods or some other marketplace, and you see all these things, and every one of them is saying reishi mushroom, shiitake mushroom, they're all saying mushroom.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I would just say is, if it says product of USA, move on, find one that doesn't say that, because that's a dead giveaway right there.
Okay, fair enough. And I think, let's see, so a lot of these questions are really centered around regimen, you know, how to take our different mushroom stacks. So again, if you're just joining us, I know I mentioned this earlier, but MycoMind certainly has compounding benefits. You know, the longer you take lion's mane, the longer you take BioPQQ, the more you're going to see that brain cell optimization, that increase in nerve growth factor, the mitochondrial boost from BioPQQ. So that's one that we suggest taking in the morning with your daily stack every single day. Myco Boost, you can take daily, you know, as Jeff just talked about, with getting that cordyceps in your system for the oxygen boost, the ATP boost. You know, you could also take that one pre-workout, maybe take a second serving or time your serving daily so that it comes pre-workout. You know, and then with MycoImmune, that's just one that, again, like MycoMind, it's compounding. You want to get on it. I like Jeff's phrasing. I like it. Get on the program and stay on it. You know, the more you take that immunomodulating compound, the more benefit you're going to see. And then just to reiterate, we've got some really cool ways that we're stacking them ourselves. MycoMind, this one is straight from Roy. I take it with Siltep. Roy takes it with Siltep and Dopamine Brain Food. So if you click that link over there in the chat section, or if you're watching this on the replay, there should be a link where you can click and see how we've set up these stacks, and you can grab these special stacks for yourself at a discounted rate for hanging out and being here with us tonight, or whenever you're watching the replay. The MycoImmune stack stacks really well with vitamin D3 and liquid curcumin to really bolster that immune system and help with vitality all around. And then the Myco Boost with smart caffeine and biocreatine as a really cool way to either set your workout on fire or give yourself that brain boost for whatever work, cognitive work that you want to conquer on any given day. So, you know, Jeff, I'm scanning through. I think I've hit all of these questions in some form or fashion. Here's one final one. And again, I think we really just kind of touched on this, but, you know, is it true that you need to take medicinal mushrooms daily for the effects? Do they not continue if you stop taking them?
Well, and yes, I would say, yeah, that's true. You do have to take them. You know, the thing with adaptogens, that's kind of the cool thing about adaptogens. You can take them daily. You don't have to stop taking them. That in China, that's how it's done. They take these. It's again, reishi, especially, it's a longevity herb. You're taking it because basically, I mean, in a lot of cases, I mean, and over there, as a longevity herb, they think of it, okay, as you're moving along in life, your immune system is slowly, let's just say, degrading on a slow basis. I mean, maybe if that happens for some people when we're younger, but I think you can take it at any age. But basically, in that sense, yeah, it's keeping your immune competence up, and so you do take it regularly. You don't, you know, take it. I mean, you could take it for a period of time. Let's say maybe you want to take it during, let's say, from fall through to the spring, and that's your program, right? Because you're like, well, that's when my immune system really goes down, and I have problems with it. I get colds or other types of immune problems. So maybe that's something that somebody would do, and they could say, okay, yeah, this is. But you know, talking about lion's mane, I think what was interesting there, you didn't bring this up, and I don't know if we did when we talked earlier, Ryan, but it was so dramatic because the clinical study that they did, and they did this with older people like 70 to 80 years old, and they put them on lion's mane 3 grams a day. Mm-hmm. And this was just mushroom powder, 3 grams a day. And then they tested them at 4, 8, 12, and 16 weeks. And each time they tested them compared to the control group, they had better memory and comprehension. Now, here's the interesting part about that was that after they stopped taking it, they tested them again. They went back down to the control. So it was, and that was kind of the cool part. Although it was also like, wow, okay, so do I have to take this forever or what? But
that makes sense if you think about it.
It does make sense. Yeah,
because the way it works, I mean, we know lion's mane is stimulating nerve growth factor, which is the signal internally for our body to produce new neurons and new brain cells. And that's not something that, you know, unless signaled, our body's not going to do something. It wants to be, our bodies are inherently lazy. They want to conserve energy. They want to, they want to get by with doing the bare minimum, because, you know, we know our brain uses more energy than the rest of our body in a disproportionate amount. So the idea of laying down new brain tissue is not something that our brain or our body is going to do unless we give it a reason to. So I think from that standpoint, it makes sense to me that when you stop introducing this compound that stimulates nerve growth factor, that you see back to baseline with the brain cell. I guess genesis would be the word.
No, I think you're right, and part of that too. Remember, is that we're talking about people that are in the, let's just say, on the downslope in their life. They're not producing as much of those compounds that are stimulating nerve growth factor, and these are proteins that are being produced to actually stimulate neurite growth.
That's a very good point, because that is a population where generally you're seeing cognitive decline.
That's right. They talk about basically using that, and I've even seen studies where they use reishi to basically slow the onset of dementia. Mm-hmm. Well, none of us want to be demented at some point, right?
No.
Some of us already are, but I mean, it's just like, no, it's like we want to slow that down. We want to keep it from getting too much out of hand. But no, it's interesting. Lion's mane is really cool. I think it's a fantastic that there is something out there like it. And the thing is that that's what it's known for in traditional Chinese medicine. Mm-hmm. And so often what happens is that then science comes along, looks at it in a scientific way, and then goes, wow, guess what? These particular compounds that we've seen in there are actually responsible for this type of activity.
Yeah, and it's really cool to see that. You see, these tinctures or tonics or teas that have been, thousands, hundreds and thousands of years, in different cultures and societies. I mean, you see it like all the research now with curcumin, and that's turmeric has long been, used in Ayurvedic medicine, and our ancestors knew what they were doing. The Native Americans had their things, and the Vikings had their things. They knew how to get from the earth these things that contained healing properties. And that's right. It's really cool to see the science now finding that. So quickly, you mentioned in that study that the effective dose for lion's mane was 3 grams. There's 1 gram per serving of our MycoMind. And I would just tell you that when I take this, I feel it. It's one of those, you just feel like your mind is on fire. I'm a huge fan of lion's mane. And, so if we wanted the 3 grams from that study, we would take 3 servings of this a day.
Well, remember too, Ryan, that we're talking about in your product, we're talking about a lion's mane that has been pre-digested, and it is actually, what's in there should be more available and active than just taking a straight powder.
Very true. Very true. That's a great point. So maybe start with 1 serving or try 2 servings. But yeah, okay. Great point. Jeff, this has been great. Any closing thoughts? We really appreciate your time, appreciate your knowledge. Is there anything that you would like to impart on our viewers and listeners before we bid them adieu?
Well, I guess the thing I would like to say is that, what we're really looking for here is we're looking for some real balance in terms of health. And when we get ill, we're out of balance some way. And that's what we're trying to, that's why we're eating certain foods. That's why we're exercising. That's why we're doing a lot of things, is to try and help our system maintain the balance. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where every one of these mushroom products comes in, is it is helping people to establish a better balance in their life and hopefully enhance their health to the point where they do find a little bit more of a stasis and a harmony, because that's really it. It's like we're looking for harmony here.
Beautiful. Jeff, thanks a lot for hanging out with us and sharing your wisdom, answering our viewers and listeners' questions. For you guys listening, if you're watching on a replay, somewhere on this screen, you should have a link that you can click. If you're watching live, on the right side of your screen, this is my right side. I don't know if I need to go this way for you guys or not, but there's links over there to to the special stacks that we have, the ways that we at Natural Stacks are using these Myco stacks to optimize our day, whether it's for energy or workouts or mental performance, or our immune system. So please check those out. We got some really cool special prices for you. And if you have any other questions that we haven't answered, you can email me, Ryan at Natural Stacks. I will do my best to answer them. If I can't, I'll track Jeff down, whether he's in China or where. Oh, we see him. There he is.
I know. I finally found what it was taking. What it took. I started fiddling with the buttons, thinking, okay, it's over. I won't screw things up now. So hello, everybody. It's been my pleasure to be here. Next time, I'll have this software figured out better.
All right. So, Jeff, thank you so much, and hope you have a great evening, and we look forward to talking to you very soon.
Very good. Thank you so much, Ryan, and thanks everybody for coming along and listening to me.
All right. Good night, everybody.